The night air smells of wet fur and old blood. A child lies on a sleeping platform, eyes fixed on the gap between the roof beams where the firelight does not reach. The adults are whispering. They have told the story before, the one about the creature that comes when children disobey, that drags the unwary into the dark between worlds. But here's the strange part. The child already knows the monster is real, not because they have seen it, because they have felt it. The weight on the chest, the shape at the edge of vision that vanishes when you turn, the cold that has no source. When did humans start creating monsters to scare children? The old answer is simple. We told stories to control behavior, to keep the young from wandering into the dark, to teach them that the world is dangerous and that the boundary between safety and the abyss is thin. That explanation sits cleanly in the modern mind. It is comfortable. It makes us the rational ones looking back at our ancestors with a pitying smile. But that raises a darker question. What if the monsters came first? What if the stories were not invented to frighten children, but to explain something that was already there, something that children saw, something that adults had learned to name because they could not bear to face it alone? Here's what nobody noticed. The oldest monster stories are not simple warnings. They are precise. They describe symptoms. The Mesopotamian Pazuzu was invoked to protect children from Lamashtu, a demon who attacked infants in their sleep, causing fever, night terrors, and sudden death. The description matches infant sleep apnea and sudden infant death syndrome with unsettling accuracy. These people did not have the word for respiratory failure, so they gave the disease a face. Think about that. The monster is not the cause of the fear. The fear is the cause of the monster, and that fear is older than language. This is the moment where the old story cracks, and something stranger begins to emerge. If you want to follow where this thread leads, into the deeper architecture of the mind that creates these figures, then subscribe, because the pattern you just glimpsed in Lamashtu is not ancient history. It is alive in the neural wiring of every person watching this, and we are only beginning to peel back the layer. Before you move on, leave the name of the night visitor you grew up with in the comments. El Coco, the Bogeyman, Baba Yaga, whatever word your childhood gave that weight on the chest. Put it there. See how many forms the same fear takes. The first crack in the simple story appears when you look at how universal the pattern truly is. Every isolated culture on every continent has its version of the night child killer, the Extabai of the Maya, the Pontianak of Southeast Asia, the Bogeyman of the English-speaking world, the El Coco of the Spanish-speaking world, the Babao of Italy, the Muma Padari of Romania. Each of these figures has the same behavioral profile. They come at night, they target children who are alone, and they are associated with a specific physical sensation, pressure on the chest, difficulty breathing, the sense of a presence watching. The official story says, these are cultural byproducts of a shared evolutionary fear of predators. And that is true as far as it goes. An fMRI study conducted by Oman, Flight, and Estebs in 2001 found that the human amygdala responds to threat-related images, snakes and spiders, within milliseconds before conscious recognition. We are hardwired to detect danger. That is real. That is the surface. But the surface is not the whole, because when you look at the content of these stories across cultures, something does not add up. The creatures do not behave like predators. They behave like something else. They pause at thresholds. They whisper. They press. They sit on the chest and wait. This is not hunting behavior. It is something stranger. It is ritualized paralysis. The Romanian Muma Padari does not eat the child. She takes them into the forest and keeps them in a state between waking and dreaming. The Japanese Moku Mokuren appears in torn shoji screens and watches. The Polish Poinetnik does not attack directly but suffocates his victims from within their own lungs. The pattern is not predation, it is intrusion. It is the violation of the boundary between the inside and the outside, between the self and the not-self. And here is where the real machinery shows itself. The single most documented cross-cultural experience of this type is sleep paralysis with hypnagogic hallucinations. The event is universal. It occurs in every population studied, from the Inuit of Greenland to the Navajo of the American Southwest. The core features are identical. A figure appears at the bedside. The individual cannot move or speak, and there is a sense of overwhelming pressure on the chest. In Newfoundland fishing communities, the figure is called the Old Hag. In Zulu culture, it is known as Isi Shwi Shwi. In Mexican folklore, Se me subió el muerto. The dead one climbs on top of you. The name changes. The experience does not. David Hufford, a folklorist at Memorial University of Newfoundland, documented this pattern across cultures for decades. His book, The Terror That Comes in the Night, analyzed hundreds of cases from societies that had no contact with one another. The symptoms were indistinguishable. The figures were different faces on the same neural event. Hufford found something else. The experience is not limited to people who believe in monsters. It occurs in atheists, in scientists, in rationalists who afterwards struggle to explain what they saw because the experience is so vivid that it overrides their worldview. An fMRI scan of patients undergoing sleep paralysis found that the amygdala activates identically to real threat detection. The brain does not distinguish between a hallucinated intruder and a physical one. The fear is genuine. The body believes. So when did humans start creating monsters to scare children? The answer is more unsettling than you think. We did not create them. We named them. The experience came first. The story came second. The child lying in the dark, feeling the presence, feeling the weight on the chest, hearing the whisper that might be wind or might be something else. That child was not afraid because of a story. The story was afraid because of the child. The child saw the monster. The adults gave it a name to make it containable, but that raises a deeper crack in the explanation. Because if these were simply explanations for sleep paralysis, why do children between the ages of 2 and 5, an age group that rarely experiences sleep paralysis, report seeing figures in their rooms with such striking consistency? The answer comes from the psychological machinery of developing brains. Reichmann's studies in the 1970s on fear acquisition in children found that fear of specific objects can be acquired through direct conditioning, but that the most persistent and irrational fears come from observation and verbal instruction. A parent saying, "Be careful of the dark," does not just inform the child. It primes the child. It activates the brain's threat detection network. It creates the expectation of danger, and the brain, being a pattern recognition machine, will find the danger to match the expectation. Have you ever wondered why children see faces in the patterns of curtains and ceiling cracks? It is not because they are imaginative. It is because their visual cortex is wired to prioritize face detection. The fusiform face area, located in the temporal lobe, is hyperactive in early childhood. It matures later than other brain regions. Children see faces everywhere because their brains are demanding faces. It is a survival mechanism. Better to mistake a rock for a predator than a predator for a rock. But the mechanism that protects the child also terrifies them. Pareidolia, the brain seeing patterns where none exist. It is not a bug. It is the central architecture of human survival. And in the dark, with no sensory input to override the pattern-seeking machinery, the brain paints the threat it expects to find. The monster in the wardrobe, the face at the window, the hand under the bed. The therapists call it a phobia. The shamans call it memory. When your pulse quickens in a dark room, it is not panic. It is your ancestors' eyes, still watching the cave mouth for what stalks them. But we should be careful here. That would be too neat. It would be too comfortable to say that the monster is simply a projection of the brain, a side effect of evolution, something we can dismiss by turning on the light. The truth is stranger. The psychological machinery that creates the monster is not separate from us. It is us. And it has a function that goes beyond fear. The function is integration. Let us look at the evidence from the most extreme cases. Individuals with dissociative identity disorder often report experiencing their alternate identities as external figures. They describe them, they name them, they negotiate with them. The alters are not external, but the brain processes them as if they are. This is not a metaphor. This is the underlying architecture of the self. The brain builds boundaries to organize experience. Trauma breaks those boundaries. The monster is not the invader. The monster is the part of the self that has been exiled. A longitudinal study of DID patients published in the Journal of Traumatic Dissociation found that the alter identities, once integrated, often resolve the original trauma that created them. The patient who was terrified of the shadow figure that haunted their childhood eventually learns that the shadow is the part of them that carries the memory they could not bear to hold. The monster is not the enemy. The monster is the protector. Here's the part most people miss. The same mechanism operates in ordinary people, not with alters, but with the parts of the self we call shame, guilt, grief, rage, the parts we push into the dark so we can function. And there, in that darkness, they take on form. They breathe. They whisper. They press against the chest. This is the threshold where the investigation turns inward. Most channels would stop at the explanation and tell you the monster's just a brain glitch. But we go further because the architecture of the self is not a glitch. It is a design. An understanding that design changes how you read every shadow you have ever seen. If you want to stay with this inquiry, if you want to be part of the conversation that maps the dark architecture of the human mind, then subscribe, because the next layer is where the real work begins, and you will not want to be outside when the door opens. In the comments, tell me what you have called the part of yourself you keep in the dark. Not a monster, a feeling, a memory, a name you have not spoken. Put it there. See what it feels like to let it breathe. When the ancient parent told the child about the creature that comes at night, they were doing more than scaring them. They were giving the child a container for a feeling that had no words. The child could not name the sensation of being watched, so the parent provided the form. The form was not the problem, the form was the solution. But forget the tidy version. The real cost is here. We forgot why we told these stories. We turned the container into the source. The modern parent tells the child there are no monsters. They turn on the light. They prove the wardrobe is empty. They close the closet door. And the child learns that the monster is not real, but the fear remains. The fear has no name now, no face, no ritual, no story to contain it. So it spreads. It becomes anxiety without object, panic without cause. The fear that has no name is the one that never leaves. The child taught that monsters do not exist learns eventually that the world is full of things that feel like monsters, but they have no way to process them. They have no word for the weight on the chest. No figure to confront, no story to integrate. We did not start creating monsters to scare children. We started creating monsters to teach children how to face the unfaceable. And we forgot. We turned the lesson into the lie. We told ourselves we were protecting them from irrational fear, but we were protecting ourselves, because the alternative is too unsettling to hold. What if the monster is not the thing under the bed? What if the monster is the part of you that still remembers what it is like to be prey? What if the weight on your chest is not a hallucination, but a visitation from a version of yourself that never learned to stop being afraid? Have you ever woken in the night and felt something in the room? Not seen it, felt it. The air changed, the darkness thickened, and you lay frozen, heart pounding, unable to move or speak. You told yourself it was the vestige of a dream. You turned over. You went back to sleep, but in that moment you were not in your bedroom. You were in 1,000 bedrooms across 1,000 generations. The same darkness, the same stillness, the same shape at the threshold. The only difference between you and your ancestor is that your ancestor knew what to call it. Here's the revelation that changes everything. Your ancestor's monster was a psychological tool. It was a map of the inner world projected onto the outer. The monster was not the darkness. It was the fear of what the darkness contained. And what the darkness contained was not a creature with teeth and claws. It was the unbearable weight of the self. The therapist and the shaman are separated by a thin wall. The therapist calls it projection. I told you this was going to happen. The shaman calls it possession. Why do you never listen to me? Both are describing the same process. How can you just ignore this? A part of the psyche that cannot be integrated is experienced as external. The difference is that the shaman talks to the monster. The therapist interprets it. But the outcome is the same. The monster, once acknowledged, loses its power. Think about that. The child who sleeps with the light on is not afraid of the dark. The child is afraid of what the dark reveals about their own mind. The fear of monsters is the fear of the self. And the child knows this. That is why the child cannot articulate it. The fear is pre-verbal. It predates language. It is the fear of being alone with the parts of the self that we do not understand. When did humans start creating monsters to scare children? We did not. We started creating monsters to give our children the words they needed to survive the night. And we forgot that this was the purpose. We turned the words into warnings. We turned the story into a punishment. And in doing so, we cut the child off from the very tool that could have helped them. Imagine a child who grows up in a culture where the night visitor is discussed openly, where the experience is normalized, where the figure is given a name and a role. That child, when they feel the weight on the chest, has a framework. They can say, the old hag came last night. They can tell the story. The act of telling changes the experience. The fear is shared. The monster loses its uniqueness. It becomes part of the collective. It becomes manageable. Now imagine a child who grows up in a culture where the experience is denied, who is told there is nothing there, who is told they imagined it. That child, when the weight comes, has no framework. The fear is private. It is shameful. It is evidence that something is wrong with them. That child does not grow out of the fear. They grow into it. It becomes tangled in their self-image. It becomes the root of a lifetime of anxiety that never finds its shape. This is the cost of forgetting. The monster is not gone. It is inside, and it is untethered. We are living in that forgetting now. The modern world has no shared language for the night terror. We medicate it. We pathologize it. We call it a disorder. The ancient parents called it a demon. Both are wrong. Both are outside the truth. The truth is that the human mind, when faced with the threshold between waking and sleeping, between the known and the unknown, creates a figure to stand at that threshold. The figure is not the darkness. The figure is the guardian of the boundary. And you have met this guardian. You know its shape, even if you have never given it a name. It is the thought that comes at 3 a.m, the memory you avoid, the part of yourself you do not want to face. It stands at the door. It does not enter until you invite it. The therapists call it the shadow. The shamans call it the ally. The child calls it the monster. They are all the same figure, seen from different angles. Here is the unsettling truth you will sit with after this video ends. You already know the monster has your face. You have always known. That is why you close your eyes when it comes. That is why you turn away. Because if you look directly at it, you would see the hunger you cannot admit you have, the rage you have buried, the grief you have refused, the part of you that wanted to be seen and instead was banished to the dark room of the self. The monster is not the cause of your fear. The monster is the form your fear takes when it has no other way to reach you. When did humans start creating monsters to scare children? The question itself hides a deeper truth. We were not creating monsters. We were creating mirrors. And when we stopped recognizing the reflection, we stopped understanding the fear. We turned the mirror into a weapon. We used the monster to frighten instead of to illuminate. This is the edge where this chapter ends, but the thread does not. The membrane between the monster under the bed and the monster walking the street in daylight is thinner than most people can afford to admit. If you have made it this far, you are not a casual viewer. You are someone who is willing to look directly at the figure in the threshold. That is rare, and that is why this channel exists. Subscribe now before the algorithm pulls you into the shallow current, because what comes next is the part we do not talk about. The stories we still tell ourselves that we do not recognize as stories. The ones that shape our waking lives. You will want to be here when that door opens. And before you go, leave the word in the comments. One word that names the part of yourself you have been running from longest. Not for me, for you. Because naming it is the first step toward turning the mirror back into a tool. In the next chapter, we go deeper into what this means for the stories we still tell ourselves. The ones we do not recognize as stories. The ones we call reality. Because the boundary between the monster under the bed and the monster walking the street in daylight is thinner than you think. It is a membrane of forgetting, and it is tearing. The question is not when we started creating monsters. The question is when we will stop running from the one we have always been. The weight on your chest is not a pressure, it is a message, and the message is older than the human voice. It is the language of the skull and the bone, of the blood that still remembers the taste of the cave. The monster is waiting. It has always been waiting. It wears your face. And it will not leave until you look at it and say, I see you. I know you. You are part of me. To forget this was to survive the wildfire of civilization. To remember is to survive what is coming next.
You never listen, you just walk
away every
single time.
The figure is standing in it.
Look at me when I'm talking to you.
You are the one who must decide whether to turn on the light or to finally meet the gaze.